Hello, my friends. Welcome back to another episode of our ProRevenge, where a lot of you join me every day to get your daily dose of satisfaction. We all love to hear stories of people getting what they deserve. In this episode, there are going to be 5 stories. The first is a revenge on a lousy upstairs neighbor that will leave you smiling with satisfaction, hopefully. The second is a juicy revenge where OP gets back at his fiancée who basically used him during the time they were together. I hope you guys stay for the stories today and subscribe for future videos. This first story is titled, Don't Block My Car In. My wife and I live in an old Victorian-style house in a college town, split into 2 rental suites, our 2-bedroom downstairs and a 4-bedroom upstairs. The first year, it was occupied by nursing students who were great. They all finished their rotations and moved out. Then we got a set of MBA students who were jerks. At first we thought, oh, they're young. Will politely complain when they don't clean up their dog mess, have loud keg parties, or play Call of Duty so loud that it rattles our windows downstairs, and they'll just stop. Well, they didn't. Their response to our requests was annoyance and non-compliance, which opened the door for me to engage in passive-aggressive revenge tactics. I have many stories from the year they resided above us. One Monday morning, after a pretty raging party upstairs, I came outside to find my car blocked in by the upstairs neighbor. Let's call him Rick. In the lease agreements, we were the ones who had exclusive use of the driveway. The upstairs renters were supposed to park on the street. However, they often parked behind us when street parking was scarce, so I always had to knock on the door to get them to move so I could go to work. This one morning, though, there was a problem. Rick had left that morning on a spring break vacation and wouldn't be back for 2 weeks. After I'd recovered from contemplating exactly how much of a deplorable human being you'd have to be to illegally park in your downstairs neighbor's driveway and then leave for 2 weeks, I rang the non-emergency police line and explained the situation. They tried to contact Rick to no avail. My legal recourse was to have the car towed to a legal vacant spot on the street at my own expense, which, given that I had to go to work, is exactly what I had to do. While I was waiting for the tow truck, I hatched a mature and juvenile revenge plan. For the juvenile part of the plan, I got a bottle of .3 brake fluid and a rag and, utilizing the extent of my artistic abilities, painted a big ol' inappropriate image on the hood with a stream going over the windshield to the roof. I left it to bake in. The mature part of the plan came to fruition when the tow truck arrived. Our city often does street sweeping and tows cars enthusiastically when doing so. They had just put up signs down one side of the street, notifying that they would be sweeping in 4 days and to please find alternative parking or risk being towed. I saw a spot on the side of the road where Rick often parked and had the driver put it there. I let him in on the plan, as he was contracted to tow cars for the city that day. He giggled a lot at my slowly emerging artwork and said he'd try to pick up Rick's car early, knowing that if he was away for 2 weeks, his company would be able to rack up a nice storage fee. The day came for street sweeping. The whole street was empty except for Rick's car. The tow truck driver who moved the car off the driveway came straight to Rick's car and towed it. I had dropped a note in Rick's mailbox explaining, without being rude, "Hey, you blocked my car in the other day and you went on vacation. I had to get your car moved at my own expense so I could go to work. I had it moved to the spot where you normally park." Cue him coming back from vacation and furiously pounding on my door asking, "Where's my car?" I explained that I moved it to the other side of the street, into the parking spot he usually parks in, because neither the police nor I could contact him, and that the city had to sweep the street last Thursday, and they towed it. I told him he'd have to call the city. He stormed off furious, only to return a few hours later. Apparently, the combination of the city's fine, the tow fee, and 10 days of storage totaled over $1,000. He threw a fit that his car had been vandalized at the tow yard. He demanded that I pay, and I politely declined, suggesting he might try small claims court if he could demonstrate that I'd done anything I was liable for. He never took me up on the offer. The artwork had come out great. The car had been left in the rain, so the inappropriate image on the hood of the Civic had rusted in. Apparently, it even earned him the nickname Rick Wheels in class. Before this revenge story, I actually didn't know that .3 brake fluid on car paint would do what it does. I did some Googling and found this little chart. Apparently, brake fluid contains glycol, which causes a chemical reaction on paint, breaking it down. So, not only did OP cause Rick to have $1,000 in fees to get his car back, he'll probably have to repaint the hood or just scrap the car. I'd just sell the car, dude. You have a giant inappropriate image on it. Oh, that revenge was too good. This next story is titled, If you break me, I systematically destroy your entire life. I apologize up front for the rather lengthy post, but it's all true, and it's my greatest revenge. It all starts about 10 years ago. I was happily engaged to a girl who I'd known for about 9 years, but had only been dating for about 1 year. Let's call her Nancy. All was good. She had the dream engagement ring, we had a nice house together, both had steady jobs, and the wedding plans were coming along nicely. About 2 months prior to the wedding, we found out that we were going to have a baby. Such happiness had never been felt before. Wedding plans continued, and the big day was only 28 days away. I came home from work one day and found that Nancy wasn't home. I called her to see if she got held up at work and to see what time she might be home, but Nancy wasn't at work. She was at her grandmother's house in another state. Nancy calmly told me that she no longer wanted to get married and that she was not coming home. Complete and utter shock. What just happened? I tried to call her back and her phone was off. I called her grandmother and there was no answer. What about the wedding? What about our baby? What about everything? No answers, no contact for 3 days. 3 days of no breath in my body, 3 days of me not eating, not sleeping, and barely being able to think. On day 4, Nancy showed up and started packing her stuff. She wouldn't say a word to me, nothing. It was like she was a totally different person. She left and sent me an email saying that she couldn't be with me again with no reasons. I began calling her sister, asking what happened. Her sister told me that she had no idea but gave me their mom's phone number. Strange. For the year that we'd been dating, Nancy said her mom was out of the picture because she was an alcoholic. Nevertheless, I called her mom and she told me that I was lucky number 3 who'd fallen for this trap. I learned everything. Her mom told me that Nancy had cut her out of her life so she couldn't ruin Nancy's game of milking guys for money and resources. Nancy had been pregnant twice before and had miscarriages, basically taking advantage of guys for everything she could before running off to her super Christian grandmother's house and claiming that the guys always cheated on her and left her with nothing. In turn, her grandma would take her in until the dust settled and she could do it again. Weeks went by and still no contact with Nancy. I had lost 20 pounds and had been counseled at my job for poor work performance. My family was livid. Family members lost money on travel plans for the wedding, and I was mortified. I lost all the deposits on everything for the wedding since it was less than 30 days before it was cancelled. I was beyond broke. My joint bank account with Nancy showed a whopping negative $2,000. I guess I wouldn't be paying the mortgage this month. I started to get a grip, and my sadness turned to rage. I had so much anger inside of me that I actually had to scale it back a bit, or else I might have gone to prison. A month and a half later, I got a text from Nancy out of the blue saying, "I had a miscarriage. You stressed me out so much that our daughter's dead." Daughter? I was having a daughter? You're blaming me for this? I thought, that's it. I'm going to wreck her. A few days of Xanax and whiskey got me over the hump of sadness again, and I was back to rage. I thought, let's do this. Most of Nancy's stuff was still at my house, which I had to walk away from because I could no longer afford it. I started to pack it all up to get rid of it somehow, but I stumbled upon a few things, her resume and her checkbook to her personal account. I read her resume, it was all fake nonsense, like everything else. I hopped on the computer, created a new Yahoo email address, and sent a long letter to her corporate office, telling them line by line how it was all lies. That felt good. Operation Checkbook, I signed her name on every check and ripped them all out of the book. I drove 30 minutes to the seediest part of town and left them on a sidewalk in front of an AM/PM for anybody to grab. I went back home and threw out all of her stuff. 2 weeks went by and Nancy called. I didn't answer. The voicemail said she got laid off due to cutbacks, and I knew that wasn't true. 2 more weeks went by, and letters from some district attorney's bad check restitution program began to trickle into the mail. Oh, and the registration renewal for her car? I shredded it. I heard through a mutual friend that since Nancy was out of work, she was staying with friends and being supported financially by her super Christian grandmother. No way. I hopped on the laptop and made a new Yahoo email address that was only 1 digit different from Nancy's real email. I emailed her super Christian grandma a video of Nancy performing some explicit acts on herself that I'd saved, making sure to find one where she was really into it with all the right expressions on her face. I titled the email, "Hey Grandma, check out this new video audition I'm doing for my new job. Let me know what you think." The email reply was, "You are disgusting. I hope your new job pays well because I'm not supporting you if you act like that." Oh, I wasn't expecting that. A 2-for-1 deal, embarrassment and financial distress. Weeks went by, and I got a call from Rent-A-Center. They wanted all of Nancy's furniture back. I had no idea it was rent-to-own. I told them I didn't have it, and they argued that she said I had it. I stuck to my guns and told them I didn't have it and didn't know where it was. That night I burned it all in the yard, $4,200 worth of furniture that she owed. I found out that Nancy had a new job, and as I was planning my next move, I heard great news. Nancy had been arrested and was in jail for embezzlement. Apparently she had some money problems and stole $5,000 out of petty cash and got busted. Oh gosh, this was great, she was done. Months went by with no updates, and then I heard from a friend that she was bailed out of jail by her grandma after taking a plea bargain for a felony conviction and 3 years probation, along with restitution. I hung my hat and called it a day. I'd gotten my revenge. A few months later the phone rang. It was a repo company looking for info on where Nancy was because they were trying to repossess her car. Okay, one last nail in the coffin. I made a few calls and found the address of where she was staying. I called the repo company back and gave them the info. They thanked me and said I was eligible for a $100 reward if they got the car back. I said, no thanks, this one's on me. In the end, Nancy's now a felon, jobless, a single mom of a kid she recently had with some random guy, and she lives in an apartment with her brother and his girlfriend. I'm happily married with a beautiful daughter and a great life. Yesterday, I got a Facebook message from Nancy. It said, congrats on the marriage and daughter. I'm glad you're happy. I replied, go get lost. And she blocked me. Life's good. Sometimes, taking the low road heals the soul. What a crazy revenge and an even crazier girl that Opie hooked up with. I can't imagine the pain Op was feeling when she basically ghosted him with the wedding being 3 weeks away and her being quote-unquote pregnant with his child. Talk about your whole world crumbling in a day or two. What a line, though. Sometimes taking the low road heals the soul. I'll have to keep that in mind. This story is titled, My Mother Was a Horrible Person. As an example, she once told me that my father was going to die after he had had a heart attack when she had already found out from the doctor that he was going to be okay. I was 8 years old at the time, and it was simply done as a punishment to make me cry. In her later years, she had COPD, which is a disease that restricts your breathing. My sister and I, who both hated her and had good reason to, had to nurse her for 9 years until she died. In these years, she did her best to cause trouble for as many people as possible, but mostly the two of us. Fortunately for us, we had worked out the way she would try, and would often be able to head her off at the pass. We had a deal between us that if she went too far, the offended party could take a break from looking after her, and the other would pick up the slack for a few weeks until the air cleared a bit. In 2008, she really offended my sister's youngest daughter, so my sister took a break. My mother then pulled a usual stunt she had been doing when she felt she was not getting enough attention. She starved herself until she was so ill that she needed hospitalization. I got a phone call from my sister one morning telling me our mother had phoned her and was so very ill, and she wanted my sister to come over and wait with her for the doctor to come. In other words, she wanted attention. My sister asked me to do it, so I did, but I decided to take a book and read it while I was there. It was a very apt book that I picked up to get revenge on her, as I knew she would be too nosy not to ask what it was about. It was a hardback book. The title, written very boldly on the cover, said, When a Child Kills. It is a book about children who were treated terribly by their parents. I sat and read it for 3 hours beside her sick bed until the doctor arrived. After she saw the title, she barely said a word the whole time. The doctor arrived and told her she was not ill enough for the hospital. Amazingly, within a couple of days she was a lot better, and she did not pull that stunt again for about a year. In 2010, I was having a break from her, and she did the same thing to try to get my attention. This time she went too far, ended up with kidney failure, and died. While registering her death, the official asked if we needed any extra copies of her death certificates, and I said, only if you have a framing service. That was stone cold the way OP said that. Oh, do you want any extra death certificates? Yeah, only if you have a framing service. This next story is titled, And This Is Why You Never Threaten Someone Permanently Stuck in Survival Mode. So, regarding the survival mode thing, years ago, I was living with a couple of friends and lost both my job and a place to live within the same 24 hours when the economy collapsed and the bank foreclosed on the owner where we were staying. I had about 2 weeks to get out, and I ended up homeless and living in my car for 2 years. That is another story entirely. The point, however, is when I was living in a large city in a vehicle, survival mode kicked in constantly. You are always worried, you are always cautious, and in the event that something happens that is a threat, you usually think of the most effective, brutal, and quickest way to remove it as a threat. As a result, even years later, now that I am stable, I really do not have the ability to gauge an appropriate response to a threat. Maybe that is why I went overboard here, but I will share the story and let others be amused or pass judgment as the case may be. When I was living in my car, I developed a relationship with someone who was a bit more stable than I was. She did not really care that I lived in a car, as I was always presentable and was able to hold down temporary work. Nobody really knew why I lived in a car unless I shared that info with them. She was big on helping people and was genuinely a good person, or so I thought at the time. We had a falling out and just gradually lost contact. Our relationship was more of a passion thing. We remained friends on Facebook and she was fairly popular on there with about 500 friends. This is important later. About a year after the two of us broke up, and about 6 months after I had last spoken to her, I was doing much better. I had just started a new job that I was about to go to training for, and afterwards, I would be out of the car and into a more permanent residence. I had done a lot of work towards this point, and things were great. I was at a Kinko's using their internet on my laptop, and the phone rang. It was her. After a brief exchange of pleasantries, she gets to the point. Her current boyfriend got her pregnant and left her, and she needed someone to take her to the abortion clinic. And since she was the poster child perfect girl to her circle of friends and family, she could not ask any of them to do it, so she was asking me. On one hand, I was perturbed that this was the first time we had spoken in a long time, and this was the only subject she felt was important enough to call me on. On the other, I tried to be a good guy. And even though it backfires, I was raised that way, but in this situation I really could not help her because I was supposed to drop my car off at a friend's house the next day and then hop on a bus to another state to my orientation for a new job. Even if I wanted to, which I really did not, I could not. I told her as much, and that is when things took a turn for the worst. She started screaming at me on the phone, acting hysterical, crying, telling me that I was a horrible person, that I had to help her, that I did not care about her, etc. By this point, the other people in the computer area are hearing her scream at me over the phone, and I am getting quite a few stares. I tell her in a tense voice that I had to get off the phone and for her to send me a message. Now some of you may be getting ahead of me here and see where this is going and think in advance that I am a jerk, but please reserve the judgment. I promise it is worth it. My Facebook chat window starts lighting up with more insults. I realize that this might bite me in the butt and start to steer the conversation, asking her details, and she gets dragged along. I confirm in the chat that she is pregnant. I confirm in the chat that he ran out on her. I asked why he ran out on her, as I thought the two of them were close, and she tells me that there is a chance that it was not his. I tell her that once again I cannot help her, as I need to catch a bus tomorrow morning. Up to this point I am willing to wish her luck and let it go, as I started a new life tomorrow. She then drops a bombshell on me and says, "If you do not help me with this, I am going to tell everybody that it is yours and that you forced yourself on helpless little me and took me against my will." Oh, heck no, she did not just say that, and then I realized that she said it over Facebook chat. Instead of warning her, instead of telling her that she is a crazy person, I instead start thinking about what a false accusation like this would do to me on the eve of everything that is about to change for my life. I have one thought, born out of the survival mode that got kicked into high gear. I wanted to destroy this person, and I knew how to do it. I asked her if she is serious when she knows there is no way the kid is mine. She says she does not care. I asked her who she thinks is going to believe her, and she says, "It is my word against yours." And who are people going to believe? You, some homeless lowlife who lives in your car, or me? Knowing I now have enough ammo, I pretend to reluctantly relent. I tell her, "Oh, darn it, fine. I will help you, but I cannot take you to the clinic tomorrow. I will have to do it later this week. I have to change plans, but let me call you tomorrow." And she agrees. I then get to work. Within a few minutes, the chat transcript has been sent to about 100 people on her friends list, and I tagged all of our mutual friends. The chat was also linked on her church page, and I went onto her employer's page and posted the screenshots as well. And yeah, I also sent it to her parents for good measure, as an afterthought. Almost instantly, my phone starts to blow up. I shut off my laptop, shut off my phone, and went out to my car to spend my last night in it. There is not much I can say about the fallout that will do it justice, more than what is probably playing in your heads. Sides were chosen, legal threats were made, firings happened, death threats were thrown around. Needless to say, her reputation was completely ruined to the point that she not only had to delete all forms of social media, but she had to move clear across the country to get rid of the stigma from the small town she grew up in. Was this over the top? Maybe. But it was so sweet. It warms my heart on cold winter nights. All I want to say is that OP got super lucky that this was over Facebook chat, where the chat logs are saved, rather than over the phone in a conversation. A false accusation like that could potentially ruin his life. Like, if she was willing to say something that severe over not getting a ride to a medical clinic, imagine what she would do in other situations. This last story is titled, There Goes the Neighborhood. When I was young, high school age, I lived with my family in a middle-upper-class suburb. Everybody in the community got along for the most part, and life was quiet, peaceful, and enjoyable. That is, of course, for one major exception, the house next to mine, which was rented by Mr. Public Nuisance. Be it drug and alcohol-fueled parties, drug busts, and constant eviction notices, there was rarely more than a week that went by without some sort of police involvement. To put him into perspective, he would have failed to get a job being a dirtbag simply because he was overqualified. One fateful night, however, the neighborhood got even. It was about 11 p.m. on a spring night. Myself and my family are attempting to sleep, however. The party bumping on the other side of the fence is making sleep or even clear thoughts all but impossible. The police had already been called. Volumes had been turned down and then turned back up as soon as the police car had pulled around the corner. I crawled out of bed and made my way out to the living room. The front door was open and my father was standing out front in a conference with the neighborhood pajama committee. They dispersed and my father came back inside. I asked him what was happening and he said, "Just be quiet and follow me." I followed my father out of the house into the backyard, where he opened up the valves for our 2 hoses. They bulged under the pressure. He handed me one of the nozzles and whispered, "On my command." We both walked over to the fence and took aim. My father waited, checking his watch, until finally his arm dropped. Streams of water appeared from all around and jetted into Public Nuisance's yard, completely drenching everybody that was in the yard. Sounds of drunk, loud partying turned into screams of shock. Now would probably be a good time to note that the neighborhood water supply was winter runoff, which usually sat above freezing temperatures. In the cool spring air, it was probably quite uncomfortable. Screams of shock were eventually overpowered by yells of rage, and Public Nuisance had lost it and was screaming half-slurred expletives. We shut the water off and somebody yelled back, "Sorry, I thought that was the dog." A few minutes later, the neighborhood pajama committee had regrouped and were giggling amongst each other. Public Nuisance was standing in the nude in front of his house, continuing to yell at the top of his lungs. At that moment, a police car pulled around the corner. Long story short, Public Nuisance was taken to jail on charges of providing alcohol to minors who happened to be at his party, and indecent exposure and lewd acts around girls under the age of 18, and a slew of alcohol and drug charges. He pled guilty to many of the charges and evaded jail time, however, because he now had a criminal record relating to minors. He was forced to move away from our community and the many schools that were nearby. That is one amazing way to get rid of a neighbor. I can imagine all the houses around just shooting water into the backyards and all the drunk people thinking it was raining. Below are my opinions on each of the stories. Story 1. Don't block my car in. This story is pure petty perfection. I can feel the frustration of dealing with entitled MBA students who ignore basic neighborly courtesy like not blocking your driveway. Rick parking in your spot and then jetting off for a 2-week vacation is next-level audacity. The brake fluid artwork on his car hood? Juvenile, yes, but so satisfying. I laughed out loud imagining that inappropriate image rusted into his Civic, earning him the nickname Rick Wheels. Pairing that with the mature move of towing his car to a street sweeping zone was genius, especially with the tow truck driver in on the plan. Costing Rick over $1,000 in fees and a ruined car hood feels like just desserts for his thoughtlessness. This story is a masterclass in balancing childish and calculated revenge. Story 2. If you break me, I systematically destroy your entire life. Wow, this one is a gut punch. Nancy's betrayal, ghosting you weeks before the wedding, faking a pregnancy and draining your bank account, is straight up sociopathic. The pain of losing everything, from your home to your emotional stability, is heartbreaking. But your comeback? Absolutely ruthless and brilliant. Exposing her fake resume, scattering her checks in a sketchy area, burning her rent-to-own furniture, and sending that explicit video to her grandmother? Each step was a calculated blow. The fact that she ended up jobless, a felon, and living with her brother feels like karma at its finest. That line, sometimes taking the low road heals the soul, hits hard. Sometimes you need to fight fire with fire. This story is a wild ride of justified vengeance. Story 3. My mother was a horrible person. This story is chilling in its quiet intensity. Your mother sounds like a master manipulator, and the cruelty of telling an 8-year-old their father would die as punishment is unfathomable. Reading when a child kills by her sickbed was a subtle but savage move. I can imagine the silence as she processed the title's implication. It's darkly satisfying that it shut down her attention-seeking stunt for a while. The death certificate quip, only if you have a framing service, is stone cold and perfectly captures the exhaustion of dealing with such a toxic person. This story shows how small, pointed acts of revenge can hit harder than outright confrontation when dealing with someone so manipulative. Story 4. And this is why you never threaten someone permanently stuck in survival mode. Holy cow, this story is intense. Your ex's attempt to blackmail you with a false accusation over something as simple as not driving her to a clinic is beyond despicable. That survival mode instinct from your homeless days clearly sharpened your instincts, and sending those chat transcripts to her friends, church, employer, and parents was a nuclear option that she brought on herself. Ruining her reputation to the point of her having to move across the country feels like a fitting consequence for such a dangerous threat. You're right. Having those chat logs saved your bacon. This story is a stark reminder not to mess with someone who's been through the ringer and knows how to fight back. Story 5. There goes the neighborhood. This one had me grinning from ear to ear. The image of the entire neighborhood coordinating a water hose ambush on Mr. Public Nuisance's loud drunken party is comedy gold. The winter runoff water must have been a shocking wake-up call for those partiers, and the excuse, "Sorry, I thought that was the dog," is pure brilliance. The fact that it led to his arrest for serious charges like providing alcohol to minors and indecent exposure, forcing him to move, is the cherry on top. This story is a perfect example of a community coming together to take down a nuisance with creativity and a bit of vigilante justice. I'd love to have seen his face when the hoses hit. Guys, and that is it for today's episode of our /ProRevenge. I hope you guys enjoyed the 3 stories in this one. If you did, be sure to leave a thumbs up. If you are not subscribed, please hit that subscribe button so you do not miss out on future stories. See you guys in the next one.